Welcome back. Welcome back to the course, Privacy and Security in Online Social Media. This is week 10, part 1. And as you can see, we are in the last 3 weeks of the course. I posted on Discourse that if you have any topics that you are interested in that we should look at as part of the course, please let us know. We'll be happy to have a discussion, find out some content about the topic and bring it to the class. And this lecture, we're also trying out something new, which is some students are online as I record this lecture. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the discourse. And if you have time and if you're able to join in the live, so to say, class before we end the semester, which is next 3 weeks, please feel free to join that also. So what we'll cover in the part 1 of week 10 is this whole idea called ethics, right? So until now, what have we been doing? We have been trying to look at social media data, collect, do some analysis, how it is all being used. What all can you get out of it? What actionable information can you get out of it? What are the sort of the pitfalls on social, like the cyberbullying, like the extortion, all of that we saw. But two critical component actually of the social media on the other side that we should always keep in mind is the ethics of collecting this data and analyzing this data, and bias of collecting this data and analyzing this data. So now we are going to look at ethics as part of this week. So this slide and the next slide, we already know this is only for making, so to say, this part of the lecture complete. So social media, we have seen interactive platforms, video sharing platforms, blogging, messaging, photo sharing. So lots of these platforms you have seen as part of this course until now. And it's also clear that people use these platforms for various different purposes, right? For example, if you look at data that was collected some time back, which says that 84% of the participants who were part of the study shared cost-related posts, which is, I want, as I said in the earlier parts of the class, I want wheelchair in the railway station, or there's traffic jam in this area, can you fix it, right? There's a cost that I want to or protest, right? Or earthquake, crisis. All of that blood during COVID, right? Or oxygen during COVID. These are cost-related posts that people use social for. That's for about 84%. 78% share content with personal connections, right? I'm sending more of, sharing more of the data to say that I'm on vacation, to sharing more on social, saying that I'm actually doing this lecture for the course. 69% share to feel more involved in the world, more connected to people. If you go back to the first lecture of the course, 2 things we said, right? Vanity of people and curiosity of people. These are the 2 important reasons why social media per se itself is very popular, because I want to show off that I'm doing this lecture. I want to do a post about teaching this class, and I'm always curious about what are others doing who I know. 68% of them share to define who they are. Validation, right? I think this generation of probably people who have got onto social in the last sort of say decade or so, some parts, in this case 68%, of them use it for defining who they are. So for example, in my case, probably this is defining who I am, right? There's also this validation part. Oh, I'm doing everything correct. I'm hope that whatever I'm doing is right. So I put it on social to see how people react to it. 49% of them share information, share to inform or entertain, right? Lots of jokes, lots of memes, all of this also keeps floating. That's about 49% of the people who use social for. But if you keep all this in mind, there's also going to be a question about when you collect this data, what are the things that we are actually looking for? How are the data that we're collecting? There's also this push and pull that we talked about before, right? Which is I can actually push content saying I'm doing this lecture. I can actually pull content saying what is if there was an hashtag. I know if this hashtag is there. Let's take BS IITM 2023. Right? If such an hashtag is there, I want to pull hashtag BS IITM 2023 to see what people are talking about, or probably paradox. Let's take that's probably right. Paradox 2023. I'm pulling the data to see what people are talking about Paradox 2023. So here are two broad ways that you can look at social media, not necessarily only research, social media data collection, analysis, all of that. So the first is interactive, which is participants or users interact with the researchers on social media platforms. For example, using Twitter to recruit participants of social media research activities. I post, for example, I have also done, right? I post about the social media, the Spotify data plus depression study that we're doing. I posted a flyer on social saying, if you're interested, please join this study. Even the paper reading session that we have been doing for like many years. Recently, I started saying that public can also join. Anybody can join the paper reading session, and so that I posted on social, right? So we are using the social media platform for doing something offline. That's the first here, and then the second one is interviews conducted on WhatsApp. So you send them again. You use the social platform for collecting data, putting out a survey, asking people to join your study, do interviews. All of this you do. That's interactive data collection method. The second one, which is probably almost everything that we have done as part of this course until now, is a non-interactive one, which is data about users that were not created as part of research are collected unobtrusively from social media platforms. The data that we collected as part of the lab, as part of this course, all the studies that I've shown you, Boston Marathon, Hurricane Sandy, all studies that we've seen, the data was not pushed onto this platform for people to study, right? The data was pushed for whatever reasons that I showed you here. Is what people used it for, but we collect it for doing whatever analysis that we want to do. Which is example is data scraping from Twitter, which we have talked about, sentiment analysis of Twitter post. We are actually looking at collecting data from Twitter to understand how people think about a particular policy. People think about a particular, so for example, today I think RRR movie won an Oscar. So what are people thinking about it, right? So that's people are not posting there to or keeping in mind that, oh, somebody will analyze this data and make an impression about what people are thinking about RRR. They're just sharing their happiness on the social. Okay. So that's where the question about, so if you think about these two things, which is one, I'm actually explicitly asking people to join and share some data so that I can use it for my research. I can use it for decision making. It does not have to be for research. It could be for building a tool, building a solution also. And the second one is I'm collecting data unobtrusively. I'm not interacting with anybody who did the post, who shared the information, and using it for whatever decisions that I'm making. Ethics in social media research. So this is where the important aspect of, look, what is right? Is it right that given all tweets are public listed, right? Less than 1% of the tweets on Twitter are from protected accounts. Protected accounts, which means 99% of the data that is on Twitter is public. So does that mean that one can just take it and infer whatever they want and use it for whatever purposes that they want? That's the critical question that we will be asking in the rest of this part. So I'm just going to come back to you guys. I think if you have any questions, let's stop. Any questions? Probably it may also enable students listening if they have any questions until now, right? They're also like you. Any clarification questions? Let's not take any discussion questions, but let's take some clarifications if there's any. If not, we can continue. Okay? Okay, sure. Or if you have any clarification questions, why don't you put it in the chat? I will, once in a while, I'll look at it and then I can take it up as and when possible. Yeah? Okay. So one thing that to understand, this is a very common word that's used in social research, which is emotional contagion. I know whether you've heard about this before. This is basically an idea of how different types of emotions that we go through as we process, as we digest, as we consume the content from social. Right? There are like papers just titled only this, probably 2 decades before, right? So this is from the social data, right? Otherwise, this concept has been there for a long time. So our interest in studying, our context in bringing this word of emotional contagion is to show that how much that we go through our emotions. This example is Insta, right? You see your friends doing posts, all the reels, all the stories. Every single post that we see, we have different sets of emotions that we go through. So meaning these emotions trigger a lot of other things within us. So the question is that fair? All the content that you're seeing, is that okay to go through all these emotions? Is it necessary for us to go through all these emotions? Is the question that we will be asking here. So here is an example. So last slide was just an Insta. This one is 4 things you're doing that makes you less productive at work, right? Again, another emotional things of social is actually making people non-productive. So that's the context that I'm giving here, which is the emotional thing that we go through can also be stressful, that it affects our day-to-day job. What are the effects of seeing social feeds? Meaning, do you, if you see currently, before starting this lecture, I was going through, this, what are the words that were trending? Hashtag Telugu, hashtag RRR, hashtag JR, NTR. All of these words were trending before I started this lecture. I just went through just quickly to see what people are talking about, right? The emotion of, wow, the country, we actually have Oscar for a song, right? So that emotion of being connected to the topic and being happy about what is going on is one effect. But I'm sure if you see your friend doing something or a colleague you have is actually vacationing while you're slogging here listening to this lecture, maybe another emotion that you may go through. Does it have an effect on your mood, right? When you start your day, I'm guessing that all of you start your day with either opening WhatsApp or your Insta or your email, right? Right? So you're getting your grades and you did not do well in the exam, versus you getting a paper accepted, versus you having a paper rejected, versus you're getting some job offers. all of this has different emotions that you go through. What effect positive, negative, neutrals? I mean, all the examples that I said is a mix of all the emotions that one can think of. And of course, I mean, this is a question that we have to keep asking ourselves. Should this effect be even there? Should I get affected about a peer of mine getting a paper accept versus a student of mine getting a reject for his grad school applications? Should it affect me? I think it's a very, very subjective question, I guess, but the important thing is to ask the question. So I'm going to show you actually about 2 studies which ended up studying the emotional aspects of users in the platform, but had some issues in how the data was collected, what problems did they have, what data did they collect, what inferences did they make, and did the inference make sense? Is the inference generalizable? Did the participants know about them being part of the study? That's because we are placing this topic in the context of ethics. Right? I mean, I can place this topic of emotions in many different ways, right? Just the increase in emotions of people using social. Increase in productivity. I mean, even though in the earlier example that I showed you, this is actually makes you less productive. There are platforms, there are users, there are groups that I know where productivity is increased just because they are actually using some social platforms. Okay. So here's the first study. The study was, meaning if you had a Facebook account in 2012 and if you were active users in India, and if you are part of the random subjects that they chose, you probably are part of this user study also. Here's what Facebook did. Facebook chose 700,000 Facebook users. Okay, they wanted to just study how people's emotions are, okay, by consuming the content on Facebook. How much my emotion is influenced or impacted by people that I'm connected with. Facebook network, feed, my feed, how does it affect my emotion? That's the goal. But they did something very interesting to set this study, which is where the ethics question would be very, very relevant. They created 4 groups to study. The first one, negatively reduced. The second one, positively reduced. They had 2 control groups, 1 each for these experimental group. And the reason why you want to set up a control group is to actually compare the baseline, that how users would have behaved if there was no reduction in the post as they did in negatively reduced or positively reduced. What does negatively reduced mean? They looked at the post. Let's take if I get 100 posts in an hour in my news feed. If I were part of the negativity reduced group, they would posts with negative words were randomly blocked. If of this 100, if there were 20 posts that had negative words, and they picked this word from a list of words that they had, like sad, let's take worrying, depressed, whatever list of words that they had, if these words existed in that post, they would not show to me on my newsfeed. Okay, so that's the negativity reduced group. The positivity reduced group is the same 100, let's take 100 posts that I see in my timeline. And if there are positive words in the post, like in this case, happy, good, blessed, amazing, fabulous, fantastic, all of these words, type of words, if it's there, they would actually remove that post. Okay. So this could be completely random, right? Because the number of posts that I see on my feed and you see on your feed are going to be very different. It depends on the number of people that we are connected with. It depends on the number of posts that the people that we are connected with. All of this is going at the back end. And the two control group that they set up was posts were randomly blocked as if in the experimental condition. So they said that, look, I'll flip a coin whether to show this post or not, and I will decide by the outcome of the flipping a coin or a die, so some random way that they did, and they deleted the post. Okay, not showed the post for now. I hope that's clear. So again, if you want, pause the video, just think about it. The idea is that 4 groups, 700,000 users, negativity reduced, positivity reduced, randomly reduced, and 4 groups, positive, negative, control, control. Control positive, control negative. Okay. I don't know. Again, if you want, you can pause the video and think about what kind of conclusions you will have from this study. Let me ask you guys, what do you think the conclusions will be in the study?
Can we speak?
Yeah.
I think most people would be negatively impacted by what they see on their social media feeds. The control group between negative groups and the baseline would be much higher than positive.
Okay. Negative people will be more. What would be the outcome? Negative people would be more. What would happen? More. Okay.
Like more people would be impacted negatively. Like whoever is being impacted negatively will be more far out from the baseline than positive people.
Okay. Let's see. Anybody else has any thoughts?
I think the time they spend on social media will reduce.
For the negative people?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, for the positive people.
For the positive people. Okay. I don't know whether they captured the time, but let's see. Okay, cool. Here is the. I mean, again, as always, I've said, feel free to take a look at the paper. This paper is not that dense, so even if you go through the paper, you should be able to get insights about the study. Here is one graph that will conclude, that will reflect on the question that at least I kept in the last slide. Right. So this is the graph, which basically, how to read the graph. The control group is in dark blue. These are control group. Okay. Light blue is experimental. Okay. And positivity reduced is here. All of them together. Negativity reduced is here. Okay. And the y-axis is, so for this one, it is negative words, percent of negative words that they used. Positive words, percent is here. Okay. So again, going through slowly, the two conditions are in 2 different colors. They're placed next to each other. The positive reduced group is on the right-hand side. The negative reduced group is on the left-hand side. And to see how positive words that they used and the negative words that they used, we should compare the graph above. Yeah, compare above and below here. Okay. So now, again, I will let you stop the video and see whether you can find the inferences. But here are the meanings of the from this graph. What does this mean? People in the positive reduced group used fewer positive words and more negative words relative to the control group. So again, let's capture this and then go back to the graph if you want. People with the positive reduced group used fewer positive words, and the negative words is at the bottom, fewer positive words and more negative words relative to the control group. Positive here, experimental group, fewer positive words, more negative words. Okay. So if you see, that is percentage of negative words is increased for the positive group. Percentage of positive words reduced for the negative groups. Okay. And if you look at the negative group, it's the opposite, which is negative group is this side on the left hand side. For the experimental group, the positive words increased, okay, and the negative words decreased. Right? So this is basically means that I think this is the conclusion, these two other lines, which is people in negative reduced groups used more positive words and fewer negative words relative to the control group. So because once my negative content in my group started reducing, that's what negativity reduced is, right? The randomly negative words post in my newsfeed was reduced. And therefore, I started becoming more positive because I started using more and more positive words and fewer negative words compared to the control group. Okay, so that's what the study showed. Effects were quite small. So if you look at it, the effects were not that huge in all the settings. So this is small, this is small. This is probably the largest effect. But even that largest effect, if you look at the percentage, right, is not that big. So that's why the line about effect not being very large. Very interesting study, of course. Interesting study, interesting conclusion that if you want to get more people to be positive, just reduce the negative post in their timeline. Right? So that's what we can do. But the problem with the study is this. Right? If you would have been a, so to say, user in the study, right? If you were a participant in the study, there are many effects that could have happened, right? They randomly deleted a post or did not show the post which was positive or negative. It could be that you missed something that you would have liked to see. It could have been that you missed something that is important. All of that effect could have happened. The study created a huge outcry. That's why this study is part of this week, which is the ethics part, right? There's a huge outcry for the study that participants did not provide any concern, meaning the 700,000 users, 700,000 Facebook users who were part of the study did not know that they were part of the study. No consent was asked for being part of the study. Right? And other than, of course, the things that we have already seen in the class, end users license agreement, terms and conditions of the platform. When I sign up, I clicked agree. All of that is the only basis on which I was part of the study. Right? No meaningful ethical review. We'll actually, the next part of the week, we'll actually talk about how to go about doing this ethical reviews, approvals, what do they look for, what is important to do when you do the studies. But for now, the point about this study is that there was no real ethical review about saying that should this study be even done, right, without asking people. Participants could have missed something important. I said before, effects of the study, open discussion around ethical aspects in studies. Given that it was Facebook study, it got a huge amount of course, media attention from the results. And with that, there also came a large loop back about saying, look, is this fair? Is this correct? A lot of ethical questions started coming up. Have companies stopped doing such studies? It's not clear that because of this outcry, did other companies not do this, are not doing the study, or just not reporting about the study? They may be doing all the study, but they're not just reporting or making it public. Facebook as an ethical review process. Currently, after the study, Facebook has, not just Facebook, many other companies have started having internal review committees where they also have to get approval, where some external people are actually part of these kind of ethical studies that they are considering, and they also have to approve the study, which is good for as part of the the whole ecosystem of doing these studies, right? Okay, so outcry as part of the Facebook study. Here's another study. This study was, I don't know whether you are aware of a platform called OkCupid. This is a platform which where you answer questions and give some details about you, depending on the answers that you are giving for different questions that are posed to you or questions that are on the platform and your preferences. There's some matching made for profiles. It's like a Tinder, I guess, but keeping all the answers that you give for questions is the algorithm, is the metric by which the mapping is done, matching is done. Okay. So this is also a large study. So this also had a 68,000 participants in the study. So quickly, this is 68,000 as an example of the analysis one can do with the data set. They made this data public. Facebook, the data was not made public, but the results and the paper, all of that was made public. As an example of the analysis one can do with the data set that is made, a cognitive ability test is constructed from 14 suitable items to validate the data set and the test. The relationship of cognitive ability to religious beliefs and political interest participation is examined. So essentially what they did was they took this data from a matchmaking website and they said that, look, let's study how these people answer questions. What kind of answers do they give? Can I actually pick up their religious belief from the answers that they give? Can we actually pick up their political affiliation from the answers that they give? A matchmaking website to these sort of say preference inferring algorithm. I took, like I did in the last week content also, I took the important aspect of the paper, particularly with either the conclusion or the methods, and I put it here. Please go take a look at the paper if you're interested. That's the link to the paper, and come back if you have any questions. All right, so the first is OkCupid as a matching algorithm that matches users based on their common questions answered as well as demographic information, which I said before. When users answer questions, they can opt to do so privately. Others cannot see their answers to specified questions, but the default setting is to do it publicly, and the vast majority of users answer questions publicly. So if you remember, I think week 6, week 7, sometime we talked about privacy settings for the social platform also, right? So in these platforms, whatever the default settings that these platforms provide, it's not clear how many people actually go change the default. Again, students in this class are probably very, very biased in that biased sample in that sense to understand whether general public changes the default settings or not. But the default settings don't get changed in many of these platforms. So which is, in this case, if the default is public, which means somebody could easily crawl and take the data. Okay. What data did they collect? They collected they collected profile information, which is username, age, gender, location, religion, opinions, astrology, whatever they had actually uploaded or given to the platform. And they also got the data about this personality scales. Keeping the answers, OkCupid actually infers these scales. The researchers got access to that scales also. Answers given to the top 2,600 questions on the site. And data we did not gather, so this is also a good thing to keep in mind. They did not get the profile text, they did not get the profile photographs, explanations given to some chosen questions. Okay. So here is one line in the paper which actually got a lot of flack. I think I'm going to show you next slide or the slide after that. I'll also show you about some Twitter conversations about this experiment and how the author of the paper is actually talking to people who are asking questions about ethics of the study also. Some may object to the ethics of gathering and releasing this data. All data found in the data set are or were already publicly available. So releasing this data set merely presents it in a more useful form. So this probably is the holy grail problem in terms of this ethics question, I guess. It's public, so is that okay to actually infer something that from the publicly available information also? Just one or two conclusions is that the density histogram of the number of questions, just for you to know how the platform is. So if you look at the histogram of the number of questions answered, there's a large set of, so this is the x-axis is the questions answered, y-axis is the density, which is basically an histogram graph to show you that how many questions are answered by how many number of people. How many answers does a question have? As we always know, there is this 80-20 principle or this Pareto principle, right? All of these data, any data in social, any data in these kind of platforms ends up being in that format. So here also, if you see large proportion of questions, right, have answers, and then as you go on the x-axis, right, answers to the questions are actually reducing, which is there are questions that never gets an answer. Vertical line shows the mean. This is to show that the mean number of questions answered. Same kind of analysis here, density histogram of age. People on this platform, this is very evident. OkCupid, one should not expect people, let's take 50 beyond being on the platform, right? So as expected, this is around 25, 30, the mean being there. So again, power law, Pareto principle, 80-20 principle is a left graph. And one of the reasons why I kept the left graph is also that any data that you collect, please try and see that whether it has, please try and understand what kind of graph does it have, what kind of pattern does it have, to make sure that you make your arguments accordingly. Okay, so I'm going to, any questions still here?
I just want to ask for this particular slide, which says the distribution of questions answered is bimodal.
Yeah.
I want to ask, what do they mean by the rightmost peak belongs to the users who are, like, is there some problem that they are indicating, like the leftmost peak concerns the data that were gathered without filtering users for number of question answers? Can you explain that?
So which part are you saying?
This slide which has point just after the OkCupid experiment graph.
Okay, this one. Yeah, that's a slide. That's a slide we are going to be talking now, right? Which is, it can be clearly seen that the distribution of questions answered is bimodal. That's a graph. Okay, we'll discuss that. Before that, any questions? No. Okay. Let's. So first of all, the bimodal. Let's look at this. Right. It can clearly be seen that the distribution of questions answered is bimodal. The leftmost peak concerns the data that were gathered without filtering the users of number of answered questions, while the rightmost peak belongs to the users who were specifically sampled because they had answered at least 1,000 questions. So what they did was, so first let's understand what a bimodal is. Bimodal is this two peaks, right? If If otherwise, if you would have seen a power law, that's how the graph would have been. Right? So the difference here is that this is bimodal because there's one peak here and then another peak here, let's say, in this case. Right? So that's why this is bimodal. The other thing that while they were collecting the data, is that they collected the data for people who had, so this is the second part, while the rightmost peak belongs to the users who were specifically sampled because they had answered at least 100 questions. So when they randomly selected the participants, they did not keep watch on the answers that people gave. Right? How many answers that, let's say, PK has given. But for studying the platform, they used a condition that, look, let's also look at people who actually answer more number of times on the platform. So that's where they decided that, okay, we should actually collect data for people whoever has answered 1,000 questions. And that's the second part of this graph. If they would not have done this, right? Which is what your Twitter data collection is, right? You don't actually keep any of these conditions. If you collect Twitter data and let's take you plot the number of tweets that people have posted, number of likes people have gotten on their post, you probably will get the graph A. Okay. But let's take, if you change the data collection and say that, look, I also want to know if people have, for set of people in my data, I want to have people who have done more than 50 tweets, right? If x-axis is the number of tweets. So then there would be a peak around 50 because you're actually forcing the data to be more than 50. That makes sense, Kunal? Yeah, okay. Okay, so that's where the this conclusion about bimodal and the leftmost peak is random, the right peak is the consciously curated data for people who have answered many number of questions. Okay, it's the last slide as part of the paper. Despite being based on data collected from public answers on a dating website, it was possible to construct a cognitive ability test that was seemingly well functioning and which was related to known correlates. So they kind of found correlation between religiousness, political interest, both positive and negative in some of them, and they were able to infer some users' preferences, which is what they had set the goal as, right? They wanted to take a matchmaking website, a dating website, to infer religious preferences and political preferences. So again, this study again had a huge outcry because look, I mean, I went onto this platform for finding matches, and therefore I answered some questions. And given that the default was public, my data went out. And if I was one of the 70,000 users, if my religious preferences and political preferences is going to be inferred, I know that I'm going to be happy about it. I don't know whether participants or anybody who's listening to this lecture will be happy about being a participant in the study. So here is the Twitter thread that I said, Twitter discussion. So this is the author of the paper. He says, oh, the OkCupid paper has been submitted. This means that the data set is now public. Enjoy. And somebody posts, this is May 8th. Somebody posts on May 11th, which is this data set is highly re-identifiable. Even includes usernames. Was any work at all done to anonymize it? The author replies saying that no, the data is already public. Right. Then the other user says differing degrees of public, also different ethical guidelines. You should speak with a research ethicist, IRB, ASAP. So IRB is something we'll do next part, which is called Institutional Review Board. Right, so the other user goes on to talking about how re-identifying is done, and what all. Yeah, please go look up OkCupid on Twitter. You'll probably end up seeing some of these tweets and getting a sense of what went on. Essentially, there was outcry about this analysis. I think this user is somewhere here. No, this user also, another user also said, oh, if your OKC username is one you have used anywhere else, I now know your sexual preferences, your answers to thousands of questions, right? So essentially what happened is there's a username on OkCupid, and if somebody could have used the same username somewhere else, if you remember our identity resolution, using identity resolution, we can actually infer other preferences from other places, other platforms that one could actually collect. That's what this user is arguing about. So here is another paper which actually talked about, or report that talked about it, but this also summarizes the Twitter thread also. More troubling is the possibility that some researchers consider to be public data that they are able to access only by using false pretenses to join a close community in which the data are shared for specific purposes. When asked, the lead researcher responded that they had made no attempt to identify the data set, citing that the fact that it was already public. And given that Twitter is already public, OkCupid is already public, what's the problem in actually making this data public? Here's a third study. This study is also using Facebook data. This is again preferences, taste, ties, and time. So this is in 2006. Researchers scraped about 1,600 students' data from Facebook and merged it with university records of an unidentified college. So interesting thing that the researchers did was, look, let's take Facebook, let's collect this data and write a report saying there are unidentified college, unidentified university. We did all this analysis and here is the data. Right? So if you see the right-hand side, the data is gender, race, ethnicity, income, household, region of origin, all of that they had actually collected. Okay, next. Including supplementary information about where the students lived on campus makes it possible to pose diverse questions about the relationship between social networks, online and offline. So this detail gave us friendship ties, housing ties, meaning if they all lived in the same hostel, if they all were in the same program. So all of these details was collected from the Facebook, whatever is possible about the users. Right? And this paper was written, Taste, Ties, and Time, analysis of Facebook. But here is what happened. Just days after the data release, other researchers deducted that the school was actually Harvard University. Right, so people thought that at least if you remember the week where we talked about anonymization, where we also did AOL, Netflix, right? All of these studies that we saw where users were inferred. In this case, Facebook's data, research was done, paper was written, unidentified college, but easily it was put together to say that the university is actually Harvard, because given all these data about the students that are part of the study, one could infer that it's actually Harvard. Right, so the paper was, but the data is already public on ethics of research in Facebook. That's where the inference was made that it's actually Harvard. Huge outcry again for this study because again, I'm sharing data with Facebook. Facebook data was scraped, and my affiliation, even if I would not have given, is actually inferred. If you go back to, let's take, I think, week 2 or 3, there also we saw this study, right, which is where users where this was offline study done by Alessandro and a team at CMU, where, if you remember, they collected, they took a picture of a person on campus, asked them to fill a survey, and then while they filled the survey, they went and got their profile picture from the data that they had already collected, showed it to the participant, asked them to confirm if it was them or not. Right? They were easily able to identify the people on the platform who had uploaded that picture, and some people who even did not, some people who even said that they have never uploaded a picture, their pictures are also pulled because somebody else had uploaded the picture of them. Right? Same kind of there, I think the concerned IRB, all that was done. In this case, the Harvard study, that was not there. So it went on to become a outcry that, look, researchers could actually infer that the participants of the study was done at Harvard. Right. The concern was amount of private information that was collected, improper access to personal information. This was scraped, so that data is there. Unauthorized secondary use, because I gave it to Facebook. You got it from Facebook, and you're actually using it for the purpose of finding out my preferences, which probably was not the purpose that I gave the data to Facebook. Errors in personal information, which could be the case. Information, how it is stored and what information is stored. So the goal, at least for all of us, given that we look at the social data, should be that, look, we should devise experiments that collect data ethically. Experiment design, right? So if you remember, I spent some content on just how to set up an experiment. Lab study, real world study, cognitive walkthrough, all that. If you're designing an experiment, make sure that you have a sense of this experiment being ethical. Second is devise method to collect the data ethically also. Right? You want to make sure that the user is aware of it. You want to make sure that there's a clear consent opt-in process for the user, so that there's no after effect of the data that you collect. Treat participants ethically. If something goes wrong, please go back to the participants and let them know. Take responsibility for the experiments and data. Right? Whatever data you collect, make sure that you protect it. If you go back to our Fair Information Practices lecture, which is consent, opt-in, opt-out, right? FTC principles, OECD guidelines, all of this. Just make sure that you kind of follow them and have a way by which, if something goes wrong, you can actually find a way to fix it. Be accountable. If you remember, the last one is also accountability. Right. We'll see more of this. We'll see more of this in this week, about what are the methods that one can use. How do you actually get more knowledge about what is ethically correct, right? As of now, I've only shown you 3 studies where things did not go well. But if I have to do these things well, what are the mechanisms? Can we actually fix these studies itself? Can we find a mechanism by which we can make these studies look much better? That's what we will look at more as part of this week. With that, I will wrap this part. What did we cover? We start off looking at what is ethics, why should we study ethics in the social media context, and particularly also the privacy context, right? You're kind of questioning some of the PII as part of social also. Why should we study ethics? And 3 studies where Facebook, OkCupid, and Facebook studies, where some parts of it could be questioned whether it is ethically correct, and leaving it for next part and the part after that to look at IRB and the other things. Thank you for watching the lecture.
Is it when the researcher, like, this is a more not related to ethics, but when the researcher had one more peek at say 1000 questions, so usually when collecting data like at a tertiary level, is it better to have these people who have more data? For example, does more than answering 1000 questions mean better insights? Like, if one answers more than 1000 questions, does it mean I'll get better insights from those set of people?
Not necessarily, no, because I just answered the question, all of them, with let's take a couple of words. Meaning, I think we should also talk about later some point in time. Is more data better? Is not clear, right? I think more quality data, is it better? Yes. Right. I think that's also, you should actually look up, let me, when we record, the chat also gets recorded for people to see, or should I say it?
It does get recorded, sir, I
Okay.
think.
So then there is there's a lot of research. I'll bring this up in the next part, which is bias, right? Some part of this week is also about bias. There's a lot of bias in social data, right? Because just because just because I can collect 1 million data, does it mean that it is actually high quality data? Not at all, right? Please also remember, even in all social data, there's also the sampling of data that goes on, right? When you send a request to Twitter API or any API for data, they are deciding whether they want to give you the data. In that sampling method, if something is not correct, or if you understand how that sampling is done, can I actually inject there's actually a nice study done by Jürgen at Munich to show that they were able to actually inject, this is there in the deck later, they were able to inject tweets onto the Twitter platform, even though Twitter is giving only 1%. They injected some 1,000 tweets and got like 95% of the tweets part of the 1% data that was collected. Otherwise, if I push 1,000 tweets, if it's only 1%, only 10 tweets must have come out of in my sampling. But they pushed this 1,000 and got 900 or 950 plus tweets part of the sampling itself, because they knew how Twitter was actually doing the sampling.
Okay, so they knew how they return responses to any API request.
Yeah. What timestamp? So actually, when you look at the study, they played around with the timestamp. Twitter initially used to return the in the API depending on the timestamp, and they kept the timestamp very regular, which is 229, 53 seconds, and 45 millisecond. I think they kept like 3 milliseconds was what Twitter decided. And every time a tweet is done in that millisecond, that comes out as part of your 1%. So now these guys figured that out and then sent all the tweets in that time frame, and all the tweets became part of and they actually did it in 2016 elections and showed that, look, if I were to bias all the researchers' analysis in the world about elections, if I did this, all the data collection by all the researchers, 1% would have gotten messed up.
Oh, okay. And one more question is a pretty general one that I have for this. Is how much has this situation, like how much has these social media platforms changed over the years? Like, is it still happening that my data is being collected by anyone, a third party, which is scraping data off, say, Instagram or Twitter or whatever?
But that may be happening, right? How can how can any platform, meaning I think platforms have become super smart. For example, LinkedIn, right? I think scraping LinkedIn is extremely hard. They will throw you out, they will blacklist you, you create different accounts and try it. All of it we have tried, but very, very hard to so to say keep these platforms these platforms will become very intelligent. If one part of the answer I would give. The second part of the answer is that, meaning I think there are companies which are doing, or organizations which are doing, also needs this data more, because you're sharing more, therefore everybody wants the data. So I think it's an arms race that people want the data, companies are trying to protect it, all of that is going on. But from the ethics point of view, things have changed a lot. Even these companies, when they do these studies, have to get some approval internally. But it may be that they are doing these studies, but not really reporting it outside, because I'm sure they want to do internal analysis to see that what is happening with the user base, all that, right? They have to run the business, for which they need to know all these inferences. Yeah.
And one more thing, like how could the OkCupid researcher have done it so that he got lesser backlash? Like how would he went on and asked the users, like, I'm taking your data? Like what would you have done?
Yeah. So this is my next part that we'll see, but just a precursor for that, or a peek into how you can do this, is that, so the usernames itself was there. No, I think when the data was made public, they could have avoided putting the usernames, which means all other inferences that others could have done is not possible. If I remove the username, then it's not clear whether PK is the one who's being referred there, right? Meaning there are other ways by which you could have picked up that is PK, but that's slightly harder. They just made the job very easy to figure out PK. And of course, they could have anonymized few other things when they made the data public. So yeah, so the first part is letting the users have a concern that the data is getting collected. If that also should happen. And the second part is, when the data is made public, it has to be. So when I was recording, I was not too sure whether the anonymization part is not yet done, right? You're still in week 8 or something. I think it comes in week 9. So there's this whole 1 hour, 1.5 hour part where I just go in detail about Netflix price, AOL, data leak, anonymization techniques, all that. Building on that, if you see, I think you will place ethics slightly better.
So I have a doubt regarding the same topic. That was identity resolution. Like if you see, even in terms of ethic, right? Even if they don't share the username, but as in the case of taste, ties, and time, what they have done is they've not shared they have made it as unidentified college, but it was later identified that it was Harvard University.
Yeah.
So I mean that is also possible even if you don't share the usernames.
Yeah. I said, right, where I'm saying that username is only one way. Username sharing could have avoided some problems, but having other columns also, you should be able to infer,
So
right? So
in
key
that way,
anonymity.
any data which is public can easily be not easily, but if you try and infer it, you can easily get a understanding of where is the data coming from or what is the common like.
Meaning yes and no, I guess, right? Because I mean, if you take saying that, for example, I'll use my own post, right? I do a post as saying hashtag let's take Delhi, hashtag let's take Palakkad. From that, you will not be able to infer my exact location, right? So it also depends on what granularity of re-identification you're talking about.
Yeah.
If you're saying that, look, yeah, I know which city you're in, but does that help? No, not really. No. That's where I think the question one should ask is that, what level of re-identification are we talking about? We are talking about
So my
PK being identified directly, or is it just a user? Yeah.
so my suggestion was, why don't they mask it? Like why don't they mask the things with some default values, like kind
Yeah.
of encryption, so that
Yeah.
they will.
So I think you should look at the anonymity lecture. So all of this we deal in the anonymity lecture.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
if you still don't understand, let me know.
Sure.
Sir, I have a couple of questions.
Okay. Anything else?
First of
Yeah,
all,
Pranav.
I'm not very concerned about the semantics one, because sometimes there is a statement like, I am not happy with my performance in quiz. So if
Yeah.
there is happy word, but there is not also. so it's replying the opposite meaning of the sentence.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Though we are capturing happy and we are making it as a positive statement, but it turns out to be negative.
No, no, no. I think that is things that people have dealt with before, and I mean, in current algorithms, if you see, is taking care of all of that. Was that if you want to take positive, if you want to get positive sentiments of what is being discussed now, what is the recording as of now that's happening, when we use not and all, it is capturing pretty well.
Okay. And that work was done around 10 years back, so it might be different when we compare it in today's world and this era,
Which
because
which study are you referring to?
I'm referring to the sentiment analysis one.
The Facebook
Facebook, yeah, yeah,
study.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the first Facebook
Actually,
study, right? Yeah, 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 sure. So I think the people, I mean, today, looking at,
today the sample is today the population is very high, so sample size would be more to get inference.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sam, meaning Facebook probably has a lot more users. I don't know about the activity, but a lot more users for sure. If we do the study now, will we get the same inference? Meaning, I think 700,000 users is hard to argue that the statistical significance would not have been there. But they, in that study, I think the difference was very small. Um, but I think if I were to do the study, I'm that conclusion still may hold good, right? Which is that if I see if my negative content is reduced, which is I have more positive content in my feed, I tend to create more positive content,
Yeah,
which is
because
evidence
influencers are
of
increasing day by day,
yeah,
so we are always going to a positive side.
yeah. And I don't know whether I think I've mentioned this word before called echo chambers, all of that. So even that plays a big role in all these emotions that we go through.
And sir, one question with related to ethics, that if the data doesn't consist of PII, that is personally identified information, then it's
Yeah.
fine to capture data. Then I then I
Not
don't think
sure.
it's ill, illogical or what.
So here's what, Prahlad. So do you think the zip code, the pin code that I'm born, is that PII or not?
Uh, I don't. No, it
Yeah,
shouldn't be.
it's not personally identifiable.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine, right? It can't identify PK. If I tell you the zip code I'm born, you can't identify PK. But unfortunately, the pin code, along with, let's take the year of birth, along with my gender that I'm male, can be identified to
That,
PK.
yeah.
So therefore, the argument of, look, if it's not PI, it's not a problem. It falls apart immediately when I start putting things together. Other non-PI
No.
content.
And sir, there was many insights about these black people, white people. There are statistics. I don't think this is a good way, because it contains racism, and this might be the concern for data collection.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, sure. The ethnic, right? Yeah, so that's definitely a concern. But those
These
data
is
that they were able to collect, right?
these insights are not helpful. This will create differences in opinion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm sure you are aware of all these. That's not relevant to the directly relevant to the class, but if you're interested, please watch this Netflix documentary called as Coded Bias. Have you heard about it? It's an MIT PhD student who did this about Amazon's face recognition system, and she showed how biased the face recognition system is because it's all trained on one type of images,
I
right?
just heard
Male,
it. I will go and see.
right? Please, it's called coded bias. Okay, anything else?
I have one thing to add on to what Prahlad actually asked in the previous question, sir. Is it that some social media tend to have this impact on emotional state more than others? Like, does Instagram impact you more than, say, Reddit, or Reddit impacts you more than Facebook? Or
So I can't recollect any research around that, Kunal. I can check about it, but the quick answer that I can think of as a user of all these platforms, it must, no. Meaning, I think the Insta influence on your emotions evidently will be probably more than LinkedIn, right? At least if I take Instagram and LinkedIn, I feel like there will be difference. I can also see the difference between Insta. So Insta probably is going to have sort of say a very different set of emotions compared to, let's take Reddit versus LinkedIn. I mean, are they statistically different? Are they sort of say, can they be reproduced, and will it be same in every time I do the study? I don't know those things. I don't even know the studies that are done, because just think about it, right? It'll be extremely hard to do that study, right? I have to control a lot of things to compare to user on a two different platform. One single platform, you can probably try something, but two platforms is very hard. Were you guys part of the BM this week? Paper reading session on Saturday?
no, sir.
Yeah. So even there, we talked about some of these things, right? This thing of comparing, these are called confounders. I mean, in confounders in a study, removing the confounders in a study is very, very hard. So therefore, if you have to have two different platforms to compare, it's going to be very hard. That's why probably it's hard to do the study. But as an hypothesis, I feel like there will be difference between platforms.
Understood, sir. Because just one thing, like people say that Reddit has this hive mindset in any sort of post that they do. One certain opinion gets upvoted more, and if you tend to keep a certain type of opinion, you get downvoted. So it impacts you in a way that you tend to move towards what opinions most people have on Reddit.
Yeah.
So
This is perfect echo chamber. Just look for echo chamber.
okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Anything else?